What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. We've got another divisional preview for you here. We previewed the Pacific last week. If you didn't catch that, go check that out. Now we've got our preview / power rankings video for the Central Division this week. An interesting division the Central is this year.
Very interesting. And we pointed it out last week that we both feel the Pacific, every team outside of San Jose, I would say, got better.
Yeah.
And in the Central, I feel that every team got worse,
Yeah.
except for maybe Arizona. But I mean, how much worse can you get?
Yeah.
And let's just get right into it. I'm excited to talk about these teams and talk about our rankings. So, at the 8th spot and in the Central, this is going to be the competition for Connor Bedard, and the consolation will be Matt Michkov. It's going to be an exciting race between two teams. I think the Chicago Blackhawks are going to get that bottom spot. I can't tell you which team's worse between Chicago and the team we have ahead of them, but this team is definitely more dysfunctional. As long as Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews are there, there's going to be a clash. There's going to be some tension in that locker room because you have two champions playing on arguably the worst team in the NHL.
And one of which, in Taves, has vocally come out and said that the rebuild that they're going through does not appeal to him. Not a
And
fan of this whatever 5-year plan that they have in place.
yeah, no, a 5-year plan for Jonathan Toews that ends when he's 39, and same for Patrick Kane. They're both going to be. I mean, Jonathan Toews will probably be out of the NHL, and Patrick Kane will be winding down. You would expect.
Yeah.
So there's not much to talk about on this forward core. Like Tyler Johnson's there, and I'm assuming Kane and Toews are going to get traded, which makes Tyler Johnson at this point their most expensive forward, which is kind of funny. Athanasiu, Domi are coming in. I think those are guys they're going to use and hopefully bring their stock up to trade at the deadline. But at the same time, there's only so much they can do because they have to reach the minimum.
Yeah.
And of their assets, Patrick Kane is going to be the guy to trade because that's the player that's going to bring in the biggest haul.
Yeah.
So they just kind of fill out their forward core with some depth and some young guys to see what they can make happen. The blue line, though, that's what I like to look at because there is nothing. This is a Connor Bedard blue line. They've got Seth Jones. All right, cool. And then that's kind of it. I mean, Jake McCabe's good. Murphy's good. But you lose on Calvin DeHaan, and there's depth there in Stillman, in Caleb Jones, Jack Johnson, Alex Vlasic. It's going to be an interesting blue line. And again, a Connor Bedard tandem and Peter Mrazek and Alex Stalock. There's just nothing here in Chicago besides the future. This is just a team that really is going to be beat up, especially by a very strong and deep Central Division.
Yeah.
Now, let's move on to their tanking brethren in the Arizona Coyotes. That's who we have at 7. And they're not much better, if any, better than Chicago, but they are not dysfunctional. This team has been tanking together for a while.
They're a cohesive unit, at least. They're not talented, but they're cohesive.
Yes. There's that. I mean, the story's going to be, what are these guys going to do in that university arena? I think
Mullet Arena.
Yeah, it's going to be just this is hockey history, folks. So stay tuned for that. Interesting for me to see Clayton Keller's career because when he came into the league, he was an exciting young forward, and because of this rebuild, there have been a lot of guys that have surpassed him. So it's interesting to see. I mean, he has 6 years left on his deal, so it's going to be interesting to see this season and the seasons to come what they do with him. If they build around him or bring pieces that he can help develop. I'm not too sure there, but they just, again, they fill the roster out with big contracts. Like you have an Andrew Ladd and guys like Lawson Krause, Zach Cassian, Nick Ritchie, and Nick Schmaltz are all there. These aren't guys for the future. I think you just have to fill your roster out. These are guys you bring in. Of course, the story, it's been Jacob Chikrin for a while. Now, to me, I don't think it makes any sense to trade him because that is a 24-year-old number one defenseman and they don't grow on trees.
No.
So even when you're out of the rebuild, that's a guy you want on your blue line to carry you through the playoffs. Of course, he needs some help. He's not the most complete of number one defensemen, but I think he is a number one defenseman, or at least he's a top line blue liner. So I would like for Arizona to keep him, but if they deal him, that's going to be interesting because this guy's only making $4.6 million for the next 3 years. So you can understand why they're asking for a haul.
Yeah.
Outside of that, Shane Gostisbehere's kind of revitalized his career, but when you consider how much he's worth, is what's he going to produce on a competitor? So I think it's best for him to stick around in Arizona, and that's the case for a lot of these guys. Is they get to play big minutes, but
Yeah.
not meaningful minutes, and sometimes that's a good place to be. And before we move on to goaltending, Barrett Hayden still is an RFA. I would expect him to re-sign because I mean, there's just not much else for him to do. Anyways, I
Yeah.
think he's a guy still looking to prove himself, like Clayton Keller. And as for goalies, they have Amelka, and I mean, I'm not sure what else they're gonna do there.
I was
Um,
impressed with Vamelka last year. I think, just not having really much of a defensive structure in front of him really
yeah,
hurt. But I think, when you're getting peppered with shots, you've seen for all the Leafs fans out there, I think that's what drove Freddie Anderson out getting 50 shots a night. It was a similar situation where the structure of defense just wasn't great in front of him.
yeah.
But I was impressed with Vamelka's skill, whether he's the guy to go to for a rebuild or once you get out of the rebuild remains to be seen. But I mean, it's been promising so far.
And I was not taking a shot at Bimilka at all. I think he was really one of the few, if only, bright spots
Oh
in
yeah.
Arizona last season. I'm kind of pointing out their lack of backups. What are they going to do? Are they going to go to Prosvetov, John Gillies? They're both kind of unproven guys. It looks like Prosvetov's going to get that backup nod, but yeah, it's a rebuilder, so nothing really to worry about there. You just kind of
Yeah.
want to develop what you have there. Now, for the next three teams, we have a bit of a clog. Some are dysfunctional, some are on their downswing, and we'll kick it off with Dallas. That's who we have at 6. For Dallas, I mean, first off, Jason Robertson, if you haven't heard, is still unsigned. And I mean, imagine if this was Toronto and it was like a Mitch Marner or William Nylander, like it was. I mean, Jason Robertson is a premier forward in the NHL, one of the best. He's like, in my opinion, he's a light version of Kirill Kaprizov.
Hmm.
So without him, I mean, Dallas will be down with Arizona, Chicago, and really the issue is that they don't have money to sign him long term, and a bridge deal they better hope costs them $7 million because, and that's with Robertson taking a discount. If it's any more than that, then it's going to be tough for them to ice a hockey team without moving out one of their big contracts. And that's been the issue with Dallas, like a San Jose, is they've given guys like Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn big contracts. And are they deserving for what they've done? Sagan and Ben are deserving of those contracts, but currently they don't play up to it. And that's the issue in Dallas is they're a competitor, but they just their money's spread in ways it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
This is a good deep team. I mean, a team that's not far off of a cup run back in 2020, but this is a team that doesn't have much star power and their depth is a little thin. And John Klingberg isn't the biggest of losses, but that does put a lot more pressure on Miro Heiskanen to carry an offensive load, which he hasn't had to because Klingberg's picked up that slack for him. So that's going to be interesting to see is how complete of a defenseman is Heiskanen. Can he run that power play and keep them strong? Or are they going to miss that true offensive defenseman? The last thing I'm worried about this with this team is their tandem. Is it's not that they have two no names in Jake Ottinger and Scott Wedgwood. Is they have guys that are coming off of good performances and goaltending's very fickle. I mean, we saw Matt Murray. He won 2 Stanley Cups as a rookie, and a lot of people consider him an AHL goalie now. And Jake Ottinger is only 23, and he's coming off of a phenomenal playoff run. But that was only, I mean, those were only a couple of performances. So I'm not sure how strong he's going to be for an entire season being the clear guy. There's no Bishop, there's no Holtby, and I'm not sure what they're going to do about Hudobin when he comes back. And Wedgwood, how strong of a backup will he be? I'm not too sure. So that's going to be an interesting run. And in the prospect pool, if they're without Jason Robertson, they don't have anything to replace him. So they're in a very scary situation in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Now, moving on to 5, really the only reason they're above Dallas is the Jason Robertson factor and the fact that we're not entirely sure what Dallas is. We have Winnipeg, and I mean, Kyle Connor for me was the only bright spot last season. And it goes to show how important Connor Hellebuck is to this team because a down year results in them not making the playoffs. There was really no other reason. They probably iced the best blue line they've had since the Dustin Byfuglien and Jacob Trouba eras.
Yeah.
The decline of Blake Wheeler is really hurting this team, and the dysfunction is really hurting this team. So it's going to be interesting to see what Rick Bowness does. I think they were really wanting to bring in Barry Trotz, but they'll have to settle for Bowness. And I mean, he's a solid coach. I'm not sure what he does for that locker room if there are issues, if he's the guy to fix them. But this will be another wait and see season for Winnipeg because they could boom. They could be one of the best teams in the NHL, but they could also bust like they did last year.
Yep.
But again, there are bright spots when you look at guys like Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, they're very explosive, but it'll be interesting to see what guys like Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, and Pierre-Luc Dubois do. Their depth as always is still solid on the forward group, but yeah.
And you mentioned Blake Wheeler. This is a Blake Wheeler that's been stripped of the captaincy too. So overall, a whole new look in the locker room of where that voice is coming from.
And
they're going no captain too for this season.
So it does look like there will be a change in identity. And when you strip a player of captaincy, I mean, unless you have someone there that you're ready to name, that generally leads towards a trade. So Winnipeg may be in a rebuilding situation, and that's why this is another team I don't see making the playoffs, and I have them down with Dallas. Their blue line, I mean, they're paying Joshua Morrissey a lot of money for what he does. Nate Schmidt, again, there's probably a little more than you want to. Neil Pionk's pretty solid though. And then they fill it out with guys like Dylan DeMello, Logan Stanley can play meaningful minutes, and then they have guys knocking at the door and Sandberg. And at what point is Hinola going to come in there? This is, in my opinion, on paper at least, a very good blue line, but it's a matter of whether or not it can click. And same thing with Connor Hellebuck, that this team's going to go as far as he takes them. And it's a matter of whether or not they can get over their dysfunctionality. And obviously, bringing in Bonus and stripping Wheeler of the captaincy, they're definitely looking for a new identity. So this, I think, will be another season of them finding themselves.
Yep.
Which usually means in missing the playoffs. Anyways, at 4, we have the St. Louis Blues, and this is another tough one because they're such a solid and consistent team. But there are a couple things here with this team. And one thing I want to point out that I don't feel enough people are talking about is they lost Jaden Schwartz to Seattle. That's a top 6 forward. This offseason, they lose David Perron to Detroit, and that's another huge loss. David Perron is in the territory of guys like Max Pacioretty, who, I mean, they score a lot of points. They put the puck in the net. And that's going to be huge for them. The only way they can eat that is if there's a surge from guys like Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas, who they're obviously planning the future around. So they're going to need guys, again, like those two, Tarasenko, to pick up the slack when it comes to scoring. And at this point in their careers, like Ryan O'Reilly and Braden Shen, they're great two-way forwards. But again, you're going to need some more out of them if this team is going to compete. They have Brendan Saad. They have Ivan Barbashev. there's a lot of options in St. Louis. It's another situation where it's just got to click, but these are huge losses. Their blue line for me is another one that's solid. I feel like they have five guys that can play in the top four in Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Colton Parayko, Nick Leddy, and Marco Scandella. But again, it's a matter of things clicking. That's a shutdown decor for sure. And then again, you have guys like Falk and Krug that can carry that offensive load. So that's the thing with St. Louis is they're a team that wins by committee. Where it all kind of lies on is Jordan Binnington and Thomas Greiss is how good will this tandem be? I don't have much expectation for Greiss, especially if there's any issue with Binnington. Greiss is not at this point in his career going to step up and be an elite starter or
Yeah.
a starter at all. He
Yeah.
is a backup. So that's where Jordan Binnington's going to have to carry the momentum he had in the playoffs and play some meaningful hockey this season. Because if he plays like he did last season, this is another team that's going to be down with Dallas and maybe even Arizona, Chicago if they can't get good goaltending.
Because Bennington just can't fall on Ville Husso like he did last year. It's his net again. So
And yeah, exactly. All right. At 3, we have the Minnesota Wild. And I mean, I don't know how you can come back and expect to compete without best hands in the league, Kevin Fiala, but they're going to do their very best.
best hands in the league.
Now, the issue for me with Minnesota, why they're falling off, is just, I mean, their cap issues and having to work around it. They're not going to be as deep. And Cam Talbot's a huge loss for them.
Yeah.
He was an all-star goalie and deservingly so. And of course, Marc-Andre Fleury is a starter, but he's 37 years old. So how good's he going to be and for how many games? I feel at this point in his career, if they could have rocked a tandem, that would have been ideal. A 40-40 split, that's the dream. And I mean, then you have Fleury fresh for the playoffs and you have Talbot in the zone ready to back up if needed. But now they're going to rely on Philip Gustafson, and that is a drop off. Not a huge drop off because he is a quality backup goalie, but he's no Cam Talbot.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the struggle, but their blue line, filthy. You have Jared Spurgeon, you have Jonas Brodin, you have Matt Dumba. That's solid. Jacob Middleton's very overlooked as a top 4 defenseman. And they have guys that can fill out that bottom pairing in Goligoski, Merrill, and their prospects. Their forward group, again, they are missing best hands in the league, Kevin Fiala. But I think they'll be okay with their young guys. I mean, we saw, I mean, I feel Matthew Boldy had a great introduction to the NHL. It's a matter of that continuing. Sam Steele's going to be interesting. I mean, any first rounder, especially a player that's performed at points in his career, it's going to be interesting to see what he does in Minnesota. And I see Minnesota as a very functional team.
Yeah.
So picking guys like that up, it should be easy to fit them into your system and get them as effective players that play quality minutes. And I mean, I love the line of Ryan Hartman, Kirill Kaprizov, and Matt Zuccarello. That's one of the more underrated first lines.
Yep.
I mean, more so Ryan Hartman and Matt Zuccarello. Everybody knows who Kirill Kaprizov is. And Joel Eriksson Ek, I mean, this team is filled with unsung heroes. So I still think it's playoffs for Minnesota. It's just they're likely not going to be as strong as they were last season, but this is still a great team. And I feel like Dean Evison is one of the more underrated coaches in the NHL.
Oh, absolutely.
Now at 2, this is where we have the Nashville Predators, and I think this is a hot take because I don't think a lot of people are very high on Nashville.
Traditionally in the past, it's been the Minnesotas and the St. Louises that have kind of played second fiddle to a certain powerhouse that we'll mention soon. So
yes,
but yeah, Nashville is a solid pick, and I love it at 2.
it's the way I look at it is they had a quality season. Of course, injuries hurt them, especially the Saros injury that really hurt them. But I feel like this is a team that have young guys that they're passing the torch to and that will help accelerate this team. They've added like Nino Niederreiter. I think that's a huge add to find a player like that. So in my opinion, Nashville's going to be better. going
Mhm.
into this season. And that's just their forward group. They're still carrying Philip Forsberg, Matt Duchene, who are guys you're hoping they can repeat or at least come close to the seasons they had last year. That's what they're
Especially Duchesne.
especially Duchesne, because that's what they're getting paid to do. After signing that contract, you want Forsberg to be putting up quality seasons. And they have the depth, that Nashville depth they've had throughout these past seasons in guys like Colton Sissons, Yakov Trenin, who in the playoffs was probably the only guy that showed up. Mikael Granlund, since moving from Minnesota, he's been quietly one of the more consistent two-way forwards. He's obviously not that first liner he was in Minnesota, and that's mostly because he hasn't had to be. But this is a very good, deep team. I'm excited to see the progression of young guys like Tanner Jeannot, Ellie Tolvanen, and Philip Tomasino. Maybe not all of them crack the roster, but these are great guys for the future. Their blue line, I mean, this is a Nashville blue line. Having a guy like Roman Yossi, who's been a premier two-way defender up until last season, where he really exploded offensively and becoming one of the best offensive defensemen in the NHL. You have a guy like that, and then you fill out this roster with guys like Ryan McDonough, Matthias Ekholm. Then you have Dante Fabro and Alexander Carrier, who, I mean, in no rights are slouches, and they're young, so they should only get better from this point. You have
Yep.
Borokop, who everybody loves. Jeremy Lauzon, they have great depth in Nashville, and that, I mean, that's been their blue line for years. So it's going to be a fun team to watch. What I'm excited to see is, again, another season of elite UC Saros and the backup race. They brought in Kevin Lankinen. He should be their backup, but I don't want to sleep on guys like Connor Ingram. And at some point, I'm excited to see what Yaroslav Askarov does.
Yeah, yes,
So
you can imagine that once Saros moves on here, that Askarov is the guy that they're going to pass the torch to. They invested so much draft stock into him and just so much time and resources into this guy that I feel like he's the go-to number one. So I mean, maybe he does come into the fold this year. Who knows?
who knows? I mean, yeah, those are four great goalies, even if you're waiting in the future. And you say passing the torch to Askarov, but Saros is only 27.
Yeah.
So they're going to have a couple seasons of a Roberto Luongo, Corey Schneider type tandem throwback. At number one, we have the Colorado Avalanche. And first off, this is going to be a team that is it's a last dance kind of situation. Nathan McKinnon is going to get paid this offseason. Not sure how much, but he could be the highest paid player in the NHL, which means that's at least $12.6 million from 6.3. So they are going to have to make some moves and some changes this offseason, but they're retaining everybody except for three key players. That's Nazem Kadri, Andre Burakovsky, and Darcy Kemper. I think they'll live. I think this
Yeah.
juggernaut will live.
I
Now let's
think they have the talent to move past this.
yes. So their forward group, I mean, yeah, you have the big three in Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and Nate McKinnon. Valerie Nichushkin really established himself as a top six forward. Arturi Lehkonen is good depth. He can play middle six, and he plays it well. Now, where you're going to want some more is JT Compher and Alex Newhook to kind of fill that void of losing Nazem Kadri. But they bring in Evan Rodriguez, who was a very good fill-in for Pittsburgh when they were out guys like Malkin, when they were out guys like Crosby. I think the famous Toronto win they had when they looked like an AHL team, that was spearheaded by a guy like Evan Rodriguez. So he can show up and play meaningful minutes.
Mhm.
So they have options. There's no one player that's gonna replace Nazem Kadri, and that's league wide. Nazem
Yeah.
Kadri is a special player in this league, but they've done well in replacing him in numbers. So they may not be as top heavy, but they have the depth. And it's just a different look. I can't even say that Colorado necessarily declines because they're coming back this season on their blue line with Samuel Girard on top of Kale McCarr, on top of Devon Taves, on top of Bowen Byram and Josh Manson.
Yep.
That's a scary blue line. Eric Johnson's no schlub either.
No.
That is a very scary blue line because you have top four defensemen all throughout, and
Yeah.
you have elite defensemen on your top pair in Kale McCarr and Devon Taves. That's just like I don't see how you do much against a blue line like that.
No.
Now, goaltending is going to be interesting. I don't feel like they lose out by replacing Kemper with Gorgiev because Gorgiev is a good starter. He has a chip on his shoulder. And what better way to prove yourself by winning a cup with Colorado? After being ousted, and rightfully so, Shesterkin is a top two goalie in the NHL. So he does have a chance to play meaningful hockey. And I mean, he couldn't ask for a better situation. And then Pavel Francouz is a very good, I feel he's a fringe starter. I could see him playing at least 30 games this season. So that takes a lot of pressure off of Gorgiev. But Gorgiev's a player. He's going to want to play some meaningful games. And I think he's going to prove himself as a legitimate starter given the opportunity.
And when you have that blue line in front of them, the pressure is significantly lessened because you have, like you just mentioned, that top five there. You could argue whoever their sixth defenseman is probably could be a second pairing on any other team. So this is a strong blue line that you saw it last year. Kemper was a solid goalie, but Kemper wasn't, blowing anyone away. But that blue line really made the difference. And I mean, when you have guys like Nate McKinnon that can get you, you know, that kind of goal cushion as well, you feel pretty confident.
Yes, this is a team very poised for a repeat. And in the West, on paper, there's not much competition. So
Yeah.
there you have it.
There you have it. Our Central Division preview power rankings video here. If you like the video, guys, give it a like down below. Subscribe so you don't miss any of our other uploads. Go check out our Pacific Division preview if you haven't already. Comment down below what you think of our rankings here. Who do you have higher? Who do you have lower? What are your overall thoughts? Let
And
us know in the comments below.
feel free to cook that Nashville pick. I understand.
Local boy putting Nashville high.
Peace.